Hello friends, and welcome to Ariel's Twilight Years, how to be a really old model. I asked Twitter/X what you would like to see me making a video about next, and someone suggested this topic, which I am delighted about because I love this subject. So I've got all my files out and I'm going to talk you through my property investment portfolio, why I bought what I did, what the good things are about each investment and what the bad things are, and what I plan to do with all of these in the future. So let's get started. My first flat. This I did not buy as an investment. I was 29 years old and I bought it to live in it. Those of you who have read my audiobook will know that I bought it to live in with my boyfriend, and when we'd been living together for 1 week I found out some quite catastrophic news and I no longer wanted to live with him, so it was my first home where I lived by myself as well. It's in West London in Ealing and it's a 1-bedroom flat. I bought it to live in, and actually it has formed the basis for my method of choosing what to buy in the future, because I was a 29-year-old single woman without a car at the time and I was travelling a lot. So the things I prioritised were feeling safe and transport links, basically, because I knew I'd be travelling home late at night. The good things about this investment turn out to be that it's near the underground. It's a 7 minutes walk to the Central Line tube station. It's got, this really mattered to me when I bought the flat. I'd seen a lot of 1-bedroom flats and this one had a landing in between the sitting room and the bedroom. So there was like a hallway with the bathroom off it, which meant that if you were asleep in the bedroom and someone else was watching TV or doing something noisy in the sitting room, it wouldn't necessarily be too much of a problem, because a lot of these small 1-bedroom flats I saw didn't have any space between the two rooms, just a door. And I was right, that was a really nice thing to have and I appreciated it. It's also upstairs, which I wanted for security because I wanted to be able to have my windows open, and if you're on the ground floor, especially if you live alone, that feels like quite a risky thing to do in a city. And also I think it's much nicer if you're going to have neighbours. I would rather have neighbours making noise below me than above me, because I think it's much less stressful. And actually I've recently discovered that I very likely have CPTSD, which I didn't realise, but I've actually got some problems with having loud noises above my head. So I didn't realise at the time that I bought this flat and then all my future flats that I was actually avoiding a trigger by buying top floor whenever I could. So that's what I did with this investment. The other nice things about it were that it's a quiet neighbourhood, it's residential, and there weren't a whole load of people having loud parties or racing their cars outside. The flat is built in a cul-de-sac, so there's not much traffic at all actually. It had a parking space, which became a really useful thing once I bought a car, but it was also really nice to have a parking space for guests, and actually parking in the area was not difficult, which was quite a treat as well. The bad things were it only has 1 bedroom, and as an investment I have discovered that if you buy studio flats or 1-bedroom flats, tenants tend not to stay that long because there's not space for them to grow as a family. But it's all I could afford at the time, so I'm not complaining. There is a railway line right behind the flat, which for some people would be a deal breaker. I couldn't afford to be fussy when I bought it, and I discovered that I stopped noticing the trains really quickly, but for some people that would definitely be a problem. And the other problem with it was that it had a short lease, and because I was a newbie I didn't know that was an issue. Its lease was 86 years when I bought it, and well, that sounded long to me, but it turns out it's not long. It starts to be a real issue for getting mortgages on the property. So I had to extend the lease, which cost me £12,000, and it wasn't something I expected to have to do. So that was probably the worst thing about it, because I could have used that short lease to help me negotiate a lower price, and I just didn't know that I could do that. Its management fees are quite expensive. If you buy flats, generally, unless it's a really fancy block of flats, you would be paying something between £500 a year and £3,000 a year, and this is towards the steeper end. But it rents out for £1,100 a month at the moment, which is a bit below market rent, but I've had the same tenants in for a while, so I have not felt inclined to raise that. It is rented out perfectly. I've had it for 17 years now, and often if people have moved out, someone else has moved out in on the next day, or even sometimes the same day. There was only one gap when I took a little break in order to get the flat redecorated, but as soon as it was redecorated, tenants moved back in again. In that time, it's needed new flooring twice, which feels like not a big deal at all. One of the good things about it being a one-bedroom flat is there's really not that much floor space. It's needed a new kitchen, and it's needed some light redecoration during that time, really not too much at all. And the thing I really love about this flat is that I actually bought it just before a property crash, and nevertheless it has doubled in value in the years that I have owned it. So it was a really good proof of concept for what turned into quite a serious business later on in my life. I didn't know this was the beginning of a portfolio of properties. I thought I was just buying a home, but because of some of the good decisions I made when I bought this one, I gained the confidence to buy more. So that's my first flat, and I still really love it. If it ever was vacant for a while, I would really love to go and have a couple of weeks back living there. Not because it was particularly glamorous or anything, but it was my first, and it is a really nice flat. It was exactly the sort of flat I wanted to buy, and I held out for the things that were important to me, like transport links, and I was right. I chose well for myself, and that has meant it's been a really nice flat for lots of people who are a bit like the person I was when I bought it to live in. I think it's been a really nice home for lots of people over the years. Flat 2 is a very different proposition. I bought this 10 years later. I hadn't really realised this was a thing I could or should be doing with my money, so it took me a while to gain the confidence to buy another one. So this one I bought in Wolverhampton, and I chose Wolverhampton because it's not too far from where I live, so it wasn't too difficult to get to. It was much, much cheaper than London. I couldn't afford to buy another property in London at that point. And I was looking for somewhere basically just with good rental yield and fairly cheap property prices. So I was essentially looking to see how much rent I could buy with the smallest possible amount of capital. And what I bought is a top floor, 2-bedroomed, because I learned 2 bedrooms is better than 1, flat, ex-council property, and I love ex-council property because generally I think it's built pretty well and the management fees tend to be quite low. It's less than a mile from Wolverhampton train station, and I always try to buy property that's within a mile of the nearest main line station or the nearest underground, because I think that's really important. It's an interesting flat because it's top floor, but it has a garden, which is quite unusual, and I really like that about it. And the layout is beautiful. It's open plan, but the kitchen area is quite separate. A lot of the newer flats being built basically have a kitchen and sitting room that are all one room. So really, you don't have a sitting room, you just have a kitchen with a seating area. And I don't like that much. This flat has a much nicer distinction between the kitchen space and the living space, and I really love it. Other good things about this flat are, it's got its own parking. It's actually got parking for 2 cars, which again is quite unusual for a flat. And it has got cheap management fees, which was very appealing. It was also very, very cheap because at this point I didn't have a whole load of spare cash. This is 10 years ago. And once I'd negotiated the price down a bit, it was only £67,000, which is really good value for a 2-bedroom flat. However, the bad things about this are, I have discovered it is in a bit of a rough area. It didn't look rough to me when I first bought the flat, but when I went to stay in the flat to redecorate it, I realised that it can get quite noisy and rowdy at night. And as a result, the tenant turnover is quite fast. It seems to be the kind of area that people come into and then out of again quite quickly. So I've never had a tenant who stayed for 5 years, for example, which is the sort of thing I've experienced with some of my other properties. Once it was actually empty for 3 months. It's my only property I've ever had empty for more than the time it's taken to redecorate. So that was a little bit of a shock. And if I had to sell one of my properties, I would probably sell this one just because of its history of not renting out quite as easily and tenants moving on quite fast. I actually had to reduce the rent on this one, so it's only just got back to the rent that I was renting it out for when I first bought it, which is not typical at all. Generally the rent just gradually goes up as new tenants come in and you raise the rent to match market rates. But this one took a dip. After it was empty for a while, I had to reduce the rent in order to get a tenant in, and then we've gradually been moving it up again every time a new tenancy starts. So it hasn't been the best investment so far. That said, it has increased in value £20,000 in the last 7 years, so that seems decent, honestly, given that it was quite a cheap flat in the first place, so that's quite a large percentage rise on the value of the property. It's definitely not my absolute best investment. That said, I do love it because it's the only one I've had time to spend actual time in and properly redecorate myself. A lot of the time I've just had to have contractors go in because there's been so little time between tenancies. So as a result, I'm quite emotionally attached to this one. And if I had to live in it, the neighbours' noise would bother me, it's true. But the actual layout of the flat is lovely and I like it that it's got a garden. So from a commercial point of view, this shouldn't be my favourite, but emotionally, I like this flat and I'd like to keep hold of it. My next property, this is in Tilford, which is not that far from me. It's less than an hour's drive, which is again why I chose it. It also has a few really big employers in a fairly small town, so it's quite a popular place for tenants to move into because a lot of people who are only doing a year or a 2-year contract with a big employer won't want to buy in the area. They'll want to rent, but they'll want reasonable, high quality accommodation. So this one was £80,000 when I bought it, and it's a top floor masonette, so it's actually on split levels. So you get a ground floor and stairs and then a top floor, but all of that is above another masonette, so you're quite high in the air, there's nothing above you, and so you get all the heat rising from the downstairs and you can have windows open with no security issues. Reasons I bought this flat and reasons I love it. 2-bedroom again. Really like the layout because it feels like a house once you're in it. It's got a big separate kitchen with really nice appliances. The kitchen was just a really high specification and I didn't have to do that. It was already like that and I love it. The rent is higher than Wolverhampton, which makes sense. It was a more expensive property to buy. It's ex-council again, and so the management fees are reasonable, and it is near to the train station and also near to one of the major employers in Tilford, so walking distance from one of those places where a lot of people work. This one has always been occupied and I've owned it 6 or 7 years, and it's only had 2 sets of tenants in it that time, so people come and they do stay quite long term, at least so far. I've had to redecorate it once and I've had to put new patio doors in, but that's basically it. The bad thing is it doesn't have parking, which is a shame. The buildings in that area are not being maintained fantastically. I went back to look at another flat in the same development and I did think of all my properties, this is the one that really looks like the buildings could do with a bit more maintenance than they're getting, and that made me a little bit sad and a bit nervous. The lease is not catastrophically short, but I am going to have to renew it probably within the next 10 years, which is a bit of a shame because it's just a pain. It feels like spending money for nothing because you don't get anything visible to show for it. But it's not going to be expensive to renew the lease, so I'm not massively worried. And its value has gone up £30,000 in 6 years, which I think is a really good return on investment so far. I would again be very happy living in this flat. I just think it's lovely and it's very spacious, which I appreciate a lot. I'm really fond of this one. Obviously Telford isn't for everyone because it's basically like a big indoor shopping centre, but once upon a time when I was 29 years old and nervous about walking home late at night, I would have really liked to live somewhere this close to the station that had people around all the time, because Telford Town Centre has all these restaurants and things and cinemas that are open, and this flat is near to it, so I think I'd have felt quite safe and secure in this one. And so far everyone who's rented it out has been a family, but if a single person or a couple of single people ended up living here, I feel like they would be safe and comfortable, and that's important to me. I then took a bit of a break from buying property because I knew when I bought my next one, my situation would change. I would become a portfolio landlord in terms of how mortgage lenders see me. I was going to have to become a limited company, so I'd be treated differently by the tax office, and I was just a bit scared, so I put it off for a while. I finally bought this property in South Wales in Barry Island in 2021, and it is absolutely beautiful. I love this one. This one was £127,000, so I'd taken quite a big jump up, and it's the first time I put more capital down than the minimum you need to. So to buy the others, I put down a 25% deposit, which is the minimum for getting a buy-to-let mortgage. This one I put down a 33% deposit, so I was becoming wealthier, so I got a bit more money to play with, so I could afford to buy something that was more expensive, and I didn't have to put in the absolute minimum in terms of capital investment. This one is a, I think you might be spotting a pattern. This is a 2-bedroom flat. It's not top floor, it's next to the top floor because the top floor wasn't available. This one I love because it's by the sea, so it's got a balcony and you can see the sea from the balcony. I've never had that as a resident anywhere, and it just seems lovely. It's got a big living room, which I really like. It's actually got a main living room and then a kind of alcove you could use as a study or an exercise room, and I just think it's a beautiful design. It's a very quiet neighbourhood given that it's a seaside town and this is near the sea. The shops are easy walking distance, like really easy walking distance. It's near the train station again, because I never buy things that aren't near the train station. And this one, of all my properties, is the one that I think would be easiest to turn into a holiday let if I wanted to. I can totally see it being a really good Airbnb. It's rented out super fast, super easy. There was a lot of choice of tenants. I had to choose between tenants, which is not something I like to do, but it certainly shows you that there is a demand. It's gone up £23,000 in value in 4 years, so that seems really good. And the area is booming. Barry is commuter belt for Cardiff. It's just 20 minutes on the train, and there are a lot of trains. So again, I feel like 29-year-old me, if she'd had work in Cardiff, she would have loved to live in this flat. And again, the people who moved in actually are 2 women, and it made me really happy to think of them being there, because it felt like a really nice flat for 2 ladies, and it's beautifully decorated. It was already beautifully decorated when I bought it. I haven't had to do anything to this, and tenants moved in within, I'm going to say, kind of 2 days of me purchasing it. It was amazing and I love it. Bad things about this one is it's not the top floor, which does make me a bit sad. The management fee is expensive and it's gone up quite a lot in the time I've had it, and I don't think the management company are all that great. I've not needed to do much in the way of upkeep yet. I've had to call plumbers out and stuff. You expect that once or twice a year, and I had to replace one of the electric heaters, but really that's a very, very small deal, and it rents out at £775 a month, which I'm really pleased with. I then moved area quite dramatically and decided to search for property in Peterborough, and this is what I bought. I bought a top floor flat, 90s built. I bought it for £106,000, and I bought this one specifically because it's where my nephew wanted to live and I was buying one for him to live in. I don't want to paint myself as some sort of amazing philanthropist. He does pay me rent. Peterborough is an area that's very competitive for finding places to live as a renter, so I decided to purchase one for him to live in. So he actually came with me and we viewed properties together. This one I think is lovely. The reason I like this one, again, 2 bedrooms, top floor, hooray! So happy to think of him on a top floor because it feels so much safer. It's a lovely quiet neighbourhood. The lease had just been renewed, so I won't have to do anything about that, which is great. It's near the station. Huge tenant demand in the area. It's commuter belt for London, which I guess is one of the reasons, but basically I bought it because it's where my nephew wanted to live. Bad things is licensing is coming in central Peterborough, so I'm going to have to pay a licence fee that renews every 5 years. They're trying to control the number of flats being rented out to tenants. There are some problems with the building. There is a bit of penetrating damp happening at the moment because I think they've not cleared the gutters. I don't think it's a huge deal, but it's not completely ideal either. This one needed more work than anything else I've bought. It needed double glazing, which I knew when I bought it, and it needed a new bathroom and boiler, which I didn't know when I bought it. I knew that the bathroom was a bit dated, but I didn't know it actually had some problems that were going to need to be seriously resolved. So this one has cost me quite a lot at this point, but I'm not worried about that long term. I rent it out at a slightly reduced rent because it's family, but it still makes sense, and in the time I have owned it, it has gone up in value. I'm not quite sure by how much because it's fluctuated a lot in the time since I bought it. I bought it 2 years ago and I love it. It was nice to be able to do some stuff to add value to it because I know if I was to sell it again, not that I'm planning to, the fact that I've put in a new bathroom and invested in double glazing will have affected the price in a really positive way. It does have a really ugly kitchen. It wouldn't take much to make it less ugly, but it is quite ugly at the moment. And Peterborough city centre does seem a little bit on the rough side. And this is my last one. This is my most recent acquisition. This is also Peterborough because I just discovered that there's so much demand for property. It seemed stupid not to buy here because I knew that it would rent out really easily, which it did. So this one is 2 bedrooms, top floor, and I love this one. I would totally live in it. There are trees all around it. It's just a really green area. Again, it's near to the station. It's got loads of built-in storage, which is fantastic because a lot of tenants are quite young and they've not bought a whole load of storage. It's not like they've got millions of wardrobes to move in. So built-in storage seems like a really nice thing that you can offer to people. It was in immaculate condition. I really love buying property from owner-occupiers. The lady who owned this one, she lived in it for a long time and she just kept it beautifully because it was her home as well as her property. So it was just completely ready to move into, really. I did a nice deep clean. I showed the estate agent round, expecting him to say, yeah, you'll need to redecorate some of the rooms, and he said, just don't bother, it's in such good condition. So that was really easy. It's near the station, it's in the commuter belt for London, it's got my favourite communal areas. Whoever does the management for that building is just on it. The communal areas, the stairs and landings are just immaculate, beautifully designed, really light and bright and airy. There are rubbish chutes, which I've never seen in a block of flats before in the UK. Love that. And it's surrounded by communal gardens, which is really nice because it just contributes to the feeling of greenery. It doesn't have parking, but it does have a garage, which is unusual. It's ex-council again. It let out so quickly and so easily, again, with competition from multiple tenants wanting to live in it. The rent is very high, so I bought it with the expectation it would rent out for £750 a month, and it rents out for £895 a month, which was completely beyond what I was expecting. It cost me £140,000 to buy, so it feels like a really good return on my investment. And the bad things are the Peterborough Central licensing thing, which means I'll have to pay an extra £500 every few years to be allowed to rent it out. Again, it doesn't seem like a really big deal. And there was nothing I could do to really improve this one, so it did feel like I've not really put my hands all over this property. It doesn't really feel like mine yet because I've done so little. I've done nothing. I mean, I've just washed the curtains and washed the walls down and stuff like that. So those are my property children, and I'll just finish off by telling you what I think I'm going to do next in terms of property. I've got 3 choices. I might buy in Barry again if I can afford it. If I can find something cheap that needs some renovating, I would like to try that this time. I was thinking about maybe buying another in Tilford because the first one I got in Tilford has rented out so well and so easily with tenants staying for so long. I really like that. Or I was thinking of buying in my own town, which is Welshpool, and property prices are cheap here. Rents are quite cheap here, but I was thinking about buying one and turning it into an Airbnb because there's not much serviced accommodation in the area. So those are the things I want to do. This is my portfolio so far, and I really hope that if you have any interest at all in property, you will find this interesting. I'm actually planning to write a book about this, but I'm in the middle of writing book 2 at the moment, and this will be book 3, so it won't be for some time. So in the meantime, I hope you find my YouTube videos useful. Thank you as always for listening. I'll be back with more next month, and it's goodbye from me. Goodbye now. Goodbye.